This podcast represents a brief history of the law relating to the issues raised. This should not be relied on as a substitute for professional advice. Specific legal advice should always be sought in relation to any particular circumstances, and no liability will be accepted for any losses incurred as a result of reliance on this podcast by those relying solely on this podcast. Welcome now to Hicksons Health Hour, the podcast series that explores a variety of current legal health topics. Throughout each episode, hear from different members of our health team with expertise in the area.
Effectively regulating the cosmetic surgery industry has been rife with unique challenges. With these challenges brought to the surface in September 2017, when a class action was commenced in the Supreme Court of New South Wales against the Cosmetic Institute and its subsidiary companies. The director and surgical director of those companies, Dr. Donor, and the cosmetic surgeons in the employ of the Cosmetic Institute. The Cosmetic Institute and its subsidiary companies across New South Wales and Queensland had been offering breast augmentation surgeries at the low cost of $5,990. From approximately 2012, the surgery was being advertised as a boob job for the cost of a cup of coffee a day, and the Cosmetic Institute allowed payment plans of $20 a week. Joining me on today's episode of Hicksons Health Hour to discuss the Cosmetic Institute class action is Zakiya Fontanel, a solicitor in our health team here at Hicksons. Welcome, Zakiya.
Thanks, Meesha.
So the plaintiff's central allegation was that the defendants created and operated a one-size-fits-all system for cosmetic breast augmentation surgery, which had several standardised elements.
Yes, so it was alleged that the Cosmetic Institute did not have regard for the unique anatomy of each patient and instead had standardised preoperative consults conducted in the absence of appropriately qualified surgeons, had standardised and deficient information being provided to patients. TCI surgeons were selected and trained by Dr. Donor to perform a single method of breast augmentation surgery on all patients. Surgery was performed by TCI surgeons with patients under twilight sedation without general anaesthesia. Substandard infection control procedures and inadequate quality control measures were in place. A bulk purchase arrangement with implant manufacturers to use the same or a very similar type of implants on all patients. Performance of breast augmentation surgery using the same method regardless of the anatomy of each individual. Provision of standardized post-operative advice and unworkable handling of complaints and revision surgery.
And so what do the plaintiffs allege occurred as a result?
The plaintiffs allege that they suffered harm as a result, including but not limited to breast asymmetry and deformity, loss of sensation, discomfort or pain, need for revision surgery, and psychiatric injury.
So the claims were brought in professional negligence and for commercially misleading conduct in contravention of guarantees under the Australian consumer law.
That's correct. The negligence claim includes allegations that the defendants breached the duty of care owed to the plaintiffs and group members by failing to take reasonable precautions against the complications of breast augmentation surgery. That's including by recommending and performing a one-size-fits-all approach and failing to consider the anatomy of each patient, by failing to ensure TCI surgeons and anaesthetists were appropriately qualified, trained, experienced, and supervised, failing to implement and maintain adequate quality control, failing to adequately review and follow up with the patients after surgery, recommending and performing breast augmentation surgery under twilight sedation rather than general anaesthetic. A claim was also made pursuant to the Competition and Consumer Act on the basis that the breast augmentation surgery was not of the nature, quality, state, or condition that might reasonably be expected to achieve the expected results of the breast augmentation service. So, for example, improved aesthetic appearance of the breasts, increased self-esteem, and confidence. The claim was also brought on the basis that representations made had been false, misleading, and deceptive.
And what did Dr. Donor and the TCI surgeons argue?
Their position was that the alleged system of breast augmentation surgery didn't exist, the TCI surgeons were adequately trained and experienced, and the TCI surgeons also pled an inherent risk defence per sections 5I of the Civil Liability Act. It's a defence on the basis that, if proved, the plaintiff's injuries are the materialisation of inherent risks of breast augmentation surgery.
So presumably the plaintiff served expert evidence in support of their position. Briefly, what did this evidence establish?
Evidence from an expert anaesthetist supported the assertion that the method of anaesthesia used was inappropriate. Evidence from 3 plastic surgeons criticised the system of breast augmentations used by the Cosmetic Institute. The evidence was particularly critical of the training and experience of the surgeons, the use of a single method of a breast augmentation surgery, and the method of anaesthesia. It suggested that post-operative management of patients was unreasonable and indicated that the incidence of revisions at the TCI companies was higher than complication rates from published studies. An expert in clinical governance suggested that TCI and Dr. Donor did not have an effective clinical governance framework and did not appropriately train or supervise the TCI surgeons. Evidence from an infectious diseases physician suggested that all doctors ought to have been aware of basic infection control procedures and that the infection control procedures employed by TCI were inadequate.
What did the expert evidence served by the defendants establish?
The TCI surgeons served expert evidence from plastic surgeons, cosmetic doctors, and anaesthetists. Collectively, the evidence supported the argument that the TCI surgeons were adequately trained and experienced, and set out that the use of the single surgical technique, the type of implants, and the method of anaesthesia were accepted by peer professional opinion as competent professional practice.
So the original statement of claim was filed in September 2017. There appears to have been a number of interlocutory arguments heard over the years, and approximately 54 notices of motion were filed over the life of the proceedings. So almost 7 years later, the parties brought a proposed settlement before the court only days before the matter was listed for hearing.
Yes, the parties executed a deed of settlement which stipulated that, inter alia, the plaintiffs agreed to release the defendants from all claims in exchange for the sum of $25 million. The lead plaintiffs were to be paid sums ranging from $120,000 to $370,000. Over 1,000 group members registered to participate in the settlement. Ultimately, the court was satisfied that the proposed settlement was fair and reasonable, and in the interests of the group members as a whole. Justice Weinstein commented that this case demonstrates the advantages of representative proceedings as a vehicle in complex medical negligence proceedings where harm has been relatively moderate.
The Cosmetic Institute class action has resulted in real change to the way the cosmetic surgery industry operates. Regulation of cosmetic surgical procedures has been enhanced as a result of the action in professional negligence.
That's right, Meesha. The majority of TCI surgeons, 9 out of 10, held AHPRA registrations only and had not completed any specialist training after internship and residency. In 2021, the Medical Board and AHPRA, the medical regulator, commissioned an external review of patient safety issues in the cosmetic surgery industry, including how to strengthen regulation of practitioners in the industry. In 2022, the independent review of the regulation of medical practitioners who perform cosmetic surgery was conducted. The review entailed a 6-month examination of the regulation of the sector. 16 recommendations to improve patient safety came out of the review to address these issues, including setting minimum standards about the education, training, and qualifications expected of medical practitioners who perform cosmetic surgery, improving the way AHPRA and the Medical Board manage cosmetic surgery notifications, strengthening regulation of advertising, and using guidelines to set clearer expectations for medical practitioners who perform cosmetic surgery. Since then, the Cosmetic Surgery Oversight Group was established by AHPRA to provide assurance that AHPRA and the Medical Board would implement the recommendations of the review. The AHPRA Cosmetic Surgery Enforcement Unit was also established. As at June 2024, it was reported that since September 2022, the cosmetic surgery hotline had received more than 770 calls, leading to 337 new complaints and 35 registered health practitioners facing regulatory action following investigations into their performance. Advertising audits also show a significant improvement in practitioners complying with new guidelines for registered medical practitioners who advertise cosmetic surgery.
This case and consequential regulatory changes mean cosmetic surgeons may wish to stay up to date with quarterly commentary published by the Cosmetic Surgery Insight Group to ensure they stay up to date as this space continues to evolve. Thanks for being here, Zakiya, and thanks to our listeners for joining us on Hicksons Health Hour. Stay tuned for our next episode where we continue exploring the intricate interplay between medicine, law, and society.